Okay, so I have used the overlay layer, on top of my creature and on the setting. But now I'm going to do this. I'm going to make a duplicate of my creature, and I'm going to push it above my overlay layer. And that's a pretty interesting thing to do. If I take my overlay and say normal, that should make sense, shadow-wise. So this is how you kind of check your shadow. So does that shadow make sense with my creature? Yeah. It's logical, right? And so once you have this, once you think you have the overlay you want, and you've checked the validity of your shadow and your lighting, I want you to turn your overlay layer to normal mode. And I want you to turn off any texture overlays, so you just have your creature on top of your overlay layer. And I want you to save it quickly just as a JPEG. I'm going to call this Carl Assignment 3 Overlay Layer to the desktop as a JPEG. Now, in a portfolio, if you were putting together a compositing portfolio where you're compositing creatures into scenes for special effects, for video games, that kind of thing, to show that your character designs will work in the different settings that it's intended to work in, often they will include this. It's an overlay layer. So it kind of shows these are the things that my character needs added to the setting in order to walk around. So when you have a character in a 3D game, they cast a shadow. They kick up dust. They have physics engines that make the steps impact the environment in a way that's more believable. And this is the way you show that in a two-dimensional portfolio. So we have that. Then the other thing you would turn in is the finished project, right? But I still have some tweaking to do. My overlay layer works. Now I'm going to add the texture overlays in, and I'm going to have my creature on top. But you see how he's too highlight in the bottom? Right? So I'm going to fade that one out, maybe not use it at all. But again, it's nice to have duplicates, because without it, you see how the orange of his feet is a little too intense? And now on this duplicate, I can push the levels more extreme. So for instance, I can push the midtones way darker on this duplicate. And then just play with its opacity. And this is kind of like an overall shadow on my character now. And I think that makes sense. Okay, last, you can also do little color adjustments. Let me do color balance, and let me get rid of some of the blue in the shadows, just on this. There we go, that helps. Because his paws are kind of glowing blue a little bit. And I can even just desaturate it. Go to hue saturation, just take out the color a little bit. And that helps for the setting. So all of these, they're small steps, and it's hard to even know that they're necessary until you give yourself the option. And that's why digital is such a powerful tool for compositing, because you can just try out all these different things and walk it back if you don't like it. Okay, now what can we do? Well, I'm going to use that overlay layer, maybe a little bit more, and instead of burning the midtones, I'm going to now burn the highlights. I just want to knock back those center scales a little bit. And we're just dealing with lots of subtlety now. So all that burning just did that much. But you have control of all those elements. Okay, you of course want to check the edges of your creature. And I like this because I have this nice sharp backlit fur and hand coming very clearly out of this background. But notice how his ears are somewhat blurry. That's where the texture overlay is going to be helpful. I need to make the background behind his arm kind of more blurry. So I'm going to steal a texture overlay and move it behind my creature. Right? So now my creature is on top of one of the texture overlays. And I am going to increase its opacity. Like so. And then I can erase away from it where I don't think it's as helpful. So a nice big eraser. I'll do a 70% opacity, so pretty opaque, but big 0% hardness eraser. Just take the opacity down, and I really want it behind my creature. But then the more of it in the background just makes it look more and more stormy, and that's okay. Okay, and if I want even more of it, I can do that trick of taking a chunk of it, like that, duplicating it, erasing away at 100% soft-edged the edges, those hard edges. So now it's a soft edge kind of texture overlay cloud I can manipulate. Move it, let me turn off auto select here. Move it now behind my creature completely. There it is. And you can see how much that can really pop that out. Right? So playing with the texture overlay in the background will help reveal a lot about your creature. I have a tiny bit of green there I don't want. And I have to figure out if that's in the background or if that's my creature. It's my creature. So that's why kind of cleaning it out nicely makes a big difference. So I'm going to do a small 100% opacity brush. Just clean out that little bit of green on all my creature layers. Because I missed that before. So sometimes you need a little bit of both, best of both worlds. So I'm going to take this texture overlay that's on top of the creature on all levels that was turned off before, and now I'm just going to do big eraser pretty strongly. And what I like about these kind of misty clouds is it makes it look like the rain is impacting and hitting the ground and sending up these whatever you would call it. Water mists. Yeah, I think about there. Okay. So I'm pretty happy with that. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's definitely about the creature. It's kind of advertising the creature in this space. And so that's placement one. That's handled. And it's done with the shadows underneath. It's done with texture overlays. And it's done thinking about the lighting and the temperature of the coloring within that space. So let's save it. I'm going to save it as assignment 3, placement 2 with my name, and then I'm going to save it as a JPEG. And then I'm going to look at the other one and just do that really quick, because I like that placement too. But you're only required to do one placement of your creature. So I'm going to save this quickly as a JPEG and keep it to 5 megabytes or fewer. Using the preview there, so I'm going to do 10. Okay, and then I can just check my image size quickly to see how it would print, because I cropped it, and it would print just under 11 inches. It's 10.77 inches by 15, but that's fine because it's 350 pixels per inch, and the minimum is 8 by 10 by 300. So I can still print this rather large, even with this crop. Okay, next, those are on my desktop. Where's that JPEG? So I have 2 assignments now that can be submitted, or an assignment that can be submitted in these 2 parts, both the overlay layer and the creature in the environment layer. So it shows how much texture overlay is affected too. But first you have to deal with coloring, you have to deal with the shadows, you have to deal with lighting. Now let's do the easier one, which can be more dramatic, because the further you push the character into the background, the more the texture fills can really make a difference in terms of coloring and lighting. So let's do the same sort of things. Let's take my placement, let's make a duplicate of him, and let's play with color balance. Though I kind of like the warmth reflecting off his stomach there. It's a little too warm. It definitely makes him a presence, and it's like he's being lit by, the lights of the house. And you know how in these kind of movies, if you have a creature coming up, they're going to be like shining headlights at it and stuff. But just the overall color I'm adjusting slightly. The shadows, I want to get rid of a little bit of the cool. Put a little bit of those reds back in there. Okay, good. Does that make a difference? Absolutely. So that helped. Now I want to burn it. And I don't want to burn the tree in front. Instead I want to burn the contrast behind the tree. So I'm just going to do this directly to my copy of my creature, and if I'm really concerned, I can make another duplicate and do it there. So a spot burning of the midtones right behind the tree. And the nice thing about just doing it directly to a copy is then I can also use the sponge tool, which you can't do on the overlay layer. Okay, so especially behind the tree, I want to do that. And then I'm going to use the sponge to desaturate a lot of that color. Okay, and then, because I did it on a separate layer, if I feel like I overdid it, I can always play with its opacity. But that made a pretty big difference. And then I can always dodge it back if I need to, a little bit, to modulate it. Okay, now the problem I have with this tree layer is that it's a little obscured. So I'm going to actually modify it by erasing away from it with a soft eraser, low opacity. A little bit bigger, especially in these areas. Yeah, so, oh, I have to deselect maybe. There we go. Just to get a little bit of that coming through. And I might even decide